Hello and welcome to Neuroshambles, the podcast that aims to shine a light into some of the murkier corners of what it's like to parent neurodivergent kids. I'm Mark Allen, and every episode I'm going to be swapping stories with my guests about some of the frankly ludicrous nonsense we have to deal with on a daily basis. So, if you're anything like me and you're feeling frazzled, overwhelmed and pretty much an outcast from polite society, join me. Hello and welcome to episode 18 of Neuroshambles. Welcome back, Neuroshamblers. As ever, it is an absolute joy to have you here. So thanks for joining me. We've got an absolutely jam-packed show for you where I'm going to be meeting a new guest, discussing our topic of the week before moving on to the positive side of things with neurodiversity champions, tiny epic wins, and of course, some what the flip moments as well. So what are we waiting for? Let's dive in.
Meet the guest.
So, if any of you Neuroshamblers are on Instagram, the chances are you've already seen lots of amazing posts from this week's guest. So her Instagram handle is the school run mum autism, with underscores between those words. And she regularly posts incredibly empowering and uplifting and empathetic content to help other parents of neurodifferent kids through their own journeys. She runs courses, online clinics, regular Q&A sessions, and in short, she is an absolute bloody powerhouse of advocacy in the autism parenting community. So I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast, it is Lisa Galley. How you doing, Lisa?
Oh, thank you. What an introduction. Thank you. I don't think I've ever been called a powerhouse before.
You are a powerhouse. Take it from me.
I'll take it.
Yeah, the stuff you put on Instagram in particular is amazing. And so it's a delight to have you here.
Well, it's a delight to be here.
For those of the listeners that aren't aware of your setup, do you want to just describe a little bit about who you've got there and the neurodivergencies at play in your household?
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to call us a neurospicy household.
Nice.
Because we're all kind of neurodivergent in our own way. So I have 3 grown-up children now,
right?
Who are, I'm going to say the ages and feel very old. So 29 is my eldest son. I have a 25-year-old and a 20-year-old. They're all autistic. We have just Barney, who lives at home with us now.
Right.
And Barney talks quite a lot on some of the things that I do. So if anyone knows me from Instagram,
I've seen
they might know
clips
Barney.
Mm-hmm.
He's my youngest, my husband is very recently been diagnosed autistic ADHD. And I do call myself neurodivergent. I have dyscalculia. So, and for anyone who doesn't know what that is, a really crude description of that is I have a real difficulty with retaining numbers and patterns, which is quite interesting in this household where everybody else absolutely loves patterns and cannot understand why I cannot understand numbers and patterns. So
that's great. You've each got your own skill set there, right?
Absolutely.
So, Sudoku comes up, it's like, Barney, get over here.
Exactly. That's exactly
Someone
it.
needs to talk to someone at the door. You're in charge.
So, that's our household. The 2 eldest do live independently now. But they often come back in dribs and drabs as and when they want feeding and all sorts of things. But,
nice.
So that's us.
All right. Well, thank you for introducing your setup. There is lots to cover in this week's topic. So let's crack on with the topic of the week.
What's the topic of the week?
Now, so much of life with neurodivergent kids is unpredictable. But for me, I think one of the biggest unknowns, and I imagine that of many parents who have neuro-exceptional kids, is trying to predict to what extent they're going to be able to live independently when they grow up. Now, obviously, that's the same issue that I think parents of neurotypical kids have, that they kind of have difficulty seeing into the future and feeling confident about their kids' ability to kind of live without support. But neurotypicals tend to follow a more linear progression into adulthood. I think the developmental stages are broadly similar for neurotypicals, which, for kids with a spikier profile, it's less clear when they're going to kind of achieve these sort of developmental milestones, or even if they do. And that's where it kind of, as a parent of a neurodivergence, I worry a little bit. My kids are still young. So Jay is 11, Otto is 9, India is just about to turn 7. So obviously the prospect of them living away from home just seems like unfathomably far away. But when I chatted to you about what potential topic we could do. You kind of mentioned that all yours are now living independently, and it gave me hope, Lisa, that there is a way out. And I was kind of heartened. So I don't want to put any pressure on you, but I'm hoping that you could give me and some of the listeners some kind of guidance into how you and your kids navigated that journey to independence and kind of picking up the life skills that you need to kind of live independently. I mean, did you have the same sort of fears that I've just kind of expressed, when the kids were younger?
100%. I think that's one of the biggest things for me now, is that helping parents to see that actually the future can be really positive, because I remember being at that point where I couldn't see a future for the kids, and it did feel very bleak. And I'm very honest, often on Instagram and kind of in the groups, and say, the realistic side of it is we do have those really dark times as parents, and I think it's okay to say that, that we just can't see a future where our kids are living independently. But definitely that was something I really worried about. And it's interesting how you mentioned that spiky profile, because that's often how I describe it to parents as well, is that spiky profile where to ditch the ages and stages charts. And, as a former speech and language therapist, that felt very strange to begin with, to say, don't be looking at the ages and stages. They don't apply to our family, to our children. And I think when we do that, it just feels very freeing to let those skills happen when they happen. And I know that can be hard as a parent, because you're like, when are they going to speak?
Yeah, because there's so much comparison going on as well, certainly when they're younger as well. It's like, oh, my child's reading. It's like, oh, just get over yourself, love. Big deal.
I mean, my boys now, and particularly Barney, I often sort of talk about how he still has that spiky profile where he's very independent in some areas of his life, but there are some areas of his life that he still struggles with, and he won't mind me explaining that. And like he struggles to tie his shoelaces, yet he's running his own business. So it's those two contrasts that I think can be hard to get your head around sometimes.
Absolutely. And it's kind of projecting it as well, and thinking, well, he's never going to be able to brush his teeth without chewing the toothbrush. Like, that's just, a genuine concern of mine. It's like, I'm going to have to brush his teeth forevermore. And when you're in the moment, where it's kind of hard to see past that. So this is why you're giving me hope.
Good. That's a good start.
Now, obviously, there are many reasons why, as parents of neurodivergent kids, we kind of want independence for them. Like, firstly, we want the best for our kids, right? With mine, I don't want them to miss out on experiencing things the world has to offer by not being able to kind of be out there and collaborating with the world and with their community. And also sort of I don't want them to be held back by anxiety. I think that is a particular issue with Otto, which we'll kind of get onto later. And I want them to experience stuff within reason. There's loads of stuff I don't want them to experience, and there's there's a lot to be said for that as well, of actually not going into experiences that you don't want to, that are going to make you uncomfortable.
I think it's a fine line, isn't it, as well? Exactly as you've just said, it's actually finding those experiences that they can cope with and that keep them regulated and within what I call their window of tolerance. But then there's those experiences where, is it beneficial for them to be out of their comfort zone? I get a lot of pushback on social media from mainly parents of neurotypical children or professionals who, when they hear me talking about you don't have to push your child out of their comfort zone, I get a lot of pushback from, well, they can't do that for the rest of their lives, they can't, they've got to face reality. And actually, do they? Because when your child is so dysregulated, they're not going to learn those skills that we're trying to help them to acquire. Unfortunately, there's lots of experiences like that where our kids are in that kind of survival mode. And I'm just a big believer in, actually, we can grow in our comfort zone. We don't have to leave our comfort zone to grow, particularly our children.
It's so hard though, isn't it? So sometimes when you see them dysregulated, you're like, this is for you, and it depends how they respond to being in there. Definitely. Out of their comfort zone as well, because, Otto will respond with extreme anxiety and Jay will respond aggression and rudeness.
Yeah.
And it's kind of what's my window of tolerance there as well. You know, what as a parent, as a human, how much am I kind of willing to go, right, okay, that's it, we're all going back home.
Yeah. 100%.
Yes, and and what you don't want to do as well is push them out of their comfort zone and have them put off something for the rest of their days as well.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a balancing act, and it's about having those strategies and those supports in place to help them to stay as regulated as possible, but knowing actually at the point where you go, no, this isn't right for us at this time in our lives. And there have been lots of times through the kids' lives where family and friends would be like, well, no, you need to push them more. And, you know, my gut instinct has always been, no, if they're so dysregulated that, like you said, they're aggressive or they're crying or and I don't mean having a tantrum where they don't want to do something. I mean having a full-on meltdown. Then we leave it and we try again maybe in a year's time.
And that has to be driven by us, because we know our kids better than anyone. You know, you have to constantly balance those different dynamics, don't you?
You do, yeah.
So my kids all are very, very different in terms of how they present and what, you know, and what they're able to kind of do without much trouble. Are yours? How are yours? Does the balance of profiles amongst your lot?
They are quite different in how they present. I don't talk about my eldest son a lot, just because he's very private.
Sure.
Barney was diagnosed at 2.5, so Barney was, I hate using words like classically autism or, you know, autistic or
Textbook.
you know, but yeah, he
Gold star.
He was, yeah, exactly. He was gold star autism from the moment he was born, and he's grown up kind of gradually understanding himself more and knowing, and he's completely like, yeah, this is me, always has been.
But I guess, you know, part of that is him growing up in a household where autism is known and understood and talked about, and whereas your oldest, you know, to a degree with Jay as well, is that he's breaking that ground.
Absolutely,
you know, he's the first one where we're like, we're looking through all the textbooks going, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, and
we're trying
when
all
it's
the
your
strategies.
first child, you've got nothing to compare them against either. So you're like,
yes, exactly.
Is this typical? Should they be doing this? You know, and then my daughter is not formally diagnosed, but she is self-diagnosed, and we've had other professionals who've said she would meet the criteria. I would say she presents very much like a girl, an autistic girl, in that she's very high masking, has done for a very long time. And it's only now that we're starting to unpick that with her. And that's actually quite difficult. It's a chapter in our life that we're going through with her now. It's her time almost. And as a family, we're kind of trying to navigate that. So I think there's always a chapter, whatever age they are. You've always got that new chapter. And you know, even with independence, she lives independently, but there are still some things that that we're kind of helping her with. So I would say they are very different, but I would say out of all three of them, Barney is probably the one that when he was younger would be more strikingly obvious that he was autistic.
Okay, yeah. If I'm honest, and I'm going to be honest, because that is what I do on this podcast, one of the reasons for desiring the independence of my kids is just for some respite from me. Like, I know but just because it's relentless, it's exhausting having to constantly be there. Like, my whole life is minesweeping ahead of my kids. It's like check in any situation, kind of looking ahead and going, right, well, he's not going to like that noise. That texture's going to set him off. There's a dog over there. Like, and having to constantly sort of clear the ground so that my kids don't experience dysregulation. And I'm hoping that eventually they'll learn to advocate for themselves and to be able to kind of do that themselves. And and it does feel a bit selfish to go, it'd be quite nice if you could give me a bit of a break. But
I don't think that's selfish. You know. I think that's self-preservation as well, because I think as parents, what you've described is, you know, that's what a lot of parents go through, what I went through. And yourself, you're in a dysregulated state when you're doing that, because you're constantly on high alert. And, you know, and that has to, you know, at some point, that's going to take an effect. And so, I think it's only natural to want a break. And from the way our family works is that the kid's dad and I actually is not Phil, who I'm with now. So we separated and got divorced when the children were younger. But that actually worked in a way because it gave us a break. So
Well, I'm sort of having that a little bit now, yeah, because
Yeah.
Tam and I are separated,
Right,
and,
okay.
and so we tag team a bit more now.
Yeah. I mean, it's
which,
obviously I wouldn't recommend
No,
it.
it's not. Anyone listening, don't do that. Just for the because there are a number of other logistics that make it so
absolutely.
much harder.
Yeah.
But yeah, we do have a bit of that respite.
I think it's important to find, those little bits of time for yourself. And even if it is just, I talk about like sitting in the car when I've done the big shop for an extra 10 minutes before I go home. And, I remember doing that a lot. And just those little micro bits of time for you.
There's that tiny window of time when I
Yeah.
put a coffee on before I start work and the kids are at school. That's just like, that's golden time. That is. But I also recognise that there are some people that just don't have that respite. That's that's going to be another episode because to kind of dig into that, because there's a lot to talk about there of how difficult it is to get people who don't understand your kids to take them for a bit.
That's it. You can't just
to look after
get a
them.
babysitter for a night out.
No.
It's not going to happen.
But obviously, I've got the energy to kind of advocate for my kids now. But in 20 years' time, I'm hoping I don't have to be there.
But I mean, from our point of view, it has got easier, and absolutely, the kids did learn to advocate for themselves and to start, doing the things that kept them regulated more. And that's something Barney talks about quite freely, is now how he has that awareness and he has that control over his life, so he can choose some of the things that he does and avoid the things that he knows are going to dysregulate him. And the other two are the same. It's a process, but it does get easier, definitely.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
It gets easier,
quite a lot in this
but
episode.
now I've got the time to do things. I'm shattered, so I don't want to do anything.
I mean, I think probably the biggest driver for wanting our kids to have independence is we worry about them when we're not around, right? We want to know that they can cope, and not just in terms of advocating for themselves, but and I think a lot of parents experience this. How do they get on socially? Because when you hear they've had like a rough day at school, that's heartbreaking for me. When Jay will tell me about an experience he had, and it's just like, that's horrible because I wasn't there to protect him, and that's a paternal instinct, and it's particularly keenly felt, I think, if you're a parent of a neurodivergent, because there's extra translation. I'm their translator between the neurotypical world and the neurodivergent world, I feel like, at the moment, and you want to protect them. So there is that side of things on a day-to-day basis. And then ultimately, and I don't want to get too morbid about this, but it is something that I'm sure is on a lot of parents' minds, is what happens when we're not around, when we're gone, and how are our kids going to cope?
Exactly. And I think, like you say, I think we all think it at one time or another, and I still think it now, even though 2 out of 3 of them are independent. We're still kind of there in the background, sort of managing their lives slightly. But I think you just have to get to a point where this isn't the best advice, but you have to switch off from it, because I've had, times where I've been 3 o'clock in the morning, wide awake, worrying about, what can I put in place? But that kind of, it stops you. I think it can be really paralysing to have those thoughts. And I think the thing for us was to make sure that the kids kind of had got a handle on what their lives were going to look like going forward and what that meant for them. So, career-wise, 2 of them have gone through kind of jobs where it didn't quite work out, and this kind of need to do things that neurotypical people were doing, and we could see the problems coming and had to let them go through it. But now they've found careers, all 3 of them, that work for them, and I feel a lot kind of calmer in myself that they've reached that point. It's not perfect, but at least they've got that basis. They've got that financial ability to support themselves, even whether that will be Barney in the future, I don't know.
Because I have the similar thing of just like concentrating on the short term. I try not to project, and that's That's the thing, though, because I just have these moments every now and again where I'll just like stop still and go, oh my God, what are they going to do when I'm not around? And like, yes, quickly brush it away. But it is something that you need to plan for. I think, I still feel like maybe that's further down the line that I need to do that, because I'm still expected to, kind of smooth the way for them at the ages they are at the moment. But eventually it's about teaching them those skills where we can, and that's the thing, isn't it? Like of empowering them where we can, and then filling in the gaps where we can't.
You can only do what you can do at the time, and I think sometimes we look too far ahead, and it's natural to do that. But again, this is something I say to parents. Am I allowed to swear? I don't know if I'm allowed to swear.
Oh yeah, please do. Go for your fucking life, Lisa.
I often say to parents, don't worry about that shit. Don't worry about the future that's that far ahead. Deal with the first few steps in front of you. And I think when we first get those diagnoses as well, it can be really overwhelming to look
absolutely
ahead to all those milestones. But it's about just taking one step at a time and dealing what you can deal with today. And that's kind of how we've got to the stage where we feel a lot more comfortable now, is because we've kind of just taken it in chunks, because it can just be so over, because you don't know what's going to happen, 5 years down the time, ahead. If somebody had told me when Barney was 3.5 and having these, regular meltdowns and, hurting himself, that he would have his own business and, be very comfortable in his own skin, I would have just absolutely laughed and said, that's just not possible.
Yeah.
So it's so hard not to think that far ahead, but you just don't know what they're capable of. They're capable of so much if we put the things in place to support them.
Absolutely. So what's quite interesting, I think, about independence with my lot is they all have very different attitudes to independence. Right? They are keen to embrace independence in varying ways. Yeah. So India is fiercely independent. She's 6, nearly 7.
Right.
And she wants to do everything herself. And she very often sends me out of the room so she can get shit done. And I try and help because I'm used to helping with the others. No, get out. And that has its downsides, because a lot of the time she won't ask for help when she needs help, and then she becomes dysregulated and she becomes frustrated, and then she kind of just shuts down and freezes basically, and is situationally mute in those instances. So there was one time as well I noticed that she'd got quite a nasty infection on her thumb, and we'd never noticed it. We hadn't noticed it because she'd been hiding it, and she didn't want to ask for help, and she didn't want to say it hurt, so she hid it from us until it got quite bad. And we noticed it, and we asked her about it, and she just clammed up, and she wouldn't tell us how she got it, or whether it hurt, or where it hurt, or and couldn't help us to help her. And when we tried to get her to go to the doctor, she freaked out. And I don't know what was causing that sort of anxiety or that overwhelm, but it's clear that she kind of, when she needs help, she finds it very difficult to ask for that. And that is a problem in its own way.
Yeah. I wonder if that as well, I mean, this is a massive, overgeneralization stereotype, but I wonder if that's partly being a girl, because you were describing Jess. I think it probably is. Jess very much didn't want to ask for help. Partly, she tells me now, she explains it as she felt like she had to kind of fit this profile of being the good girl, like the one who didn't make a fuss. And I don't know whether that's because she had 2 brothers who were very much more kind of would openly make a fuss. But that Jess was very similar, and now it's only now we're kind of unpicking that.
Yeah, I mean, Tam as well is exactly the same. It's really frustrating because I want to help anyone. Do you know what I mean? You need help? Great, let's help you. And they just deny my help, deny my assistance. It's terrible. Now, Jay is a very different kettle of fish because he's got PDA.
Right, okay.
So that is self-sufficiency.
There you go.
To the extreme, isn't it? Because at its very core, PDA is a desire for independence. Yeah. Right? That's what he wants more than anything. And the thing is, like, he doesn't think he needs us.
Yeah.
Like, he thinks that he's absolutely fine getting through the world because he never sees the amount of shit we have to do to smooth things
That's
over for him. He's got
exactly
no
it, yeah.
idea.
You're just so micromanaging it, aren't you? It's just, yeah.
Yeah, the amount of obstacles we remove from his way and the amount of
Yeah.
things that with the battles that we have to fight. It's like he thinks he's riding without stabilizers. This is my analogy, I think. He thinks he's just freewheeling, like me and
Amazing.
Tam are just like running along, so propping him up and making sure he doesn't fall over. And he's just like, screw you guys, I'm going. And he doesn't understand how much effort it takes to kind
Yeah.
of get him to be there. And you know, things like reducing demands as much as we possibly can on him, and like not responding when he reacts with anger or aggression, and allowing ourselves to be completely driven by his agenda.
Yeah.
Right, all of these accommodations
That's hard work.
we make for him.
Yeah.
The world is not going to put up with that shit when he's out there.
Yeah.
So it's really important that he understands at some point what we're doing for him, so he understands what other people might not be willing. I don't know how you navigate that.
Yeah, I mean, PDA, absolutely, I'm with you, but I think it's okay for us to do those things for them now, because I think
Yes.
in the long run, I think they will get to that point where
Yeah, I mean, I've got no choice.
you've got no choice. No,
I'm not
exactly.
gonna
You've got no
leave him
choice.
to it. Yeah, I know you have to be running around and clearing the stuff ahead of him and picking up the detritus afterwards. But eventually, hopefully, you know, he'll be able to kind of
Yeah.
survive.
Yeah.
We'll see. Now, the absolute contrast to all of this in terms of attitudes to independence is Otto.
Right.
Because Otto is so anxious about everything in the world. He constantly needs adult guidance throughout everything he does, and it's so important for him in terms of avoiding dysregulation. So I've described it previously on the podcast, but the best way I can describe Otto is that he needs a Sherpa through life constantly. So a trusted adult that just goes ahead of him a little bit and that does all the heavy lifting and knows the routes and can go, come on, it's this way and you do this. And once they've done that and they've kind of shown him the way and they've given him that guidance, he's on board. If he's asked to go alone, it's really difficult for him to do that, and he just won't do it, and he gets really anxious, and it's really crippling for him. So he opts out of loads of things at school, for example, if it's not scaffolded enough for him, or if he doesn't have that trusted adult. So obviously my worry for Otto is very different from my worry for Jay and my worry for India. You know, I worry that he's going to miss out on opportunities that are there for him. So that's a very different presentation of their profile in relation to independence and how independent he's willing to be.
Yeah, I mean,
or able to be.
Barney was very much like that and is to a certain degree. Yeah, I would say out of all three of them, he was probably the most anxious over anything sort of new, any new opportunities. But again, I think whether it's right or wrong, I didn't push him to do anything that he didn't want to do. And at the time, I think we got a lot of pushback from people saying, even at school, like after school activities, or he was happy in his little bubble with his trains and his, and his modelling. And we did stay like that for a very long time. Even in the holidays, we would stay at home. Yeah. And they didn't always fit with the other two's profile. But I firmly believe we did the right thing. Because now as an adult, he's built that resilience. He's got it over time. But he still does those. He still stays in that bubble to a certain degree, and he's living a very happy, fulfilled life. So we're back to what we were saying before, weren't we? It's that fine line. It's that balance between do we need to set these things up for them, or do we allow them to kind of tell us what they feel comfortable doing? And I get what you're saying about missing out on opportunities. And as a parent, we often think, oh, I'd really love for them to do this. It would be great for them. But I think sometimes we have to take a step back and go, is it great for them? Or is it something that we want them to do? Is it for them or is it for us? And it's a change of perspective sometimes, I think.
It is. I have this thing about for Otto. So, because the thing is, he instantly says no to stuff that he's unsure of because that's safe for him. Yeah. So there's a thing that, at the moment that he had to go to a different after school club. It was, just those logistics. The one that we needed him to get on was fully booked at 2 minutes past 4 when the lines opened because it's insane around here. So we had to get him onto a different one. But he's been there before and we know he likes it. But he was so anxious about that. And it's like, actually, you're going to be fine. And we kind of pushed him towards that.
Yeah.
And he was super anxious and super dysregulated. But then he went the first day and he's like, yeah, it's great. I love it. Because he knows what it is, right? And I knew he was going to love it. And it's that balance.
And it's about just making sure those things are in place, isn't it? That scaffolding's there for those sort of things that, you know, if you really feel it's something he'd benefit from, it's just thinking about what else can you do to just reduce that anxiety. Because I think as adults, we, you know, if we're going somewhere new, I always do a Google Earth first and see where's the parking.
Nice.
You know, if I can't see what is expected, then I get extremely anxious. So I think sometimes with kids, I'm not saying you do this, but we think that they're so resilient, we can just throw them in and they'll be fine.
Yes, yeah.
Where actually they need the same sort of support that we need when it's something new. And you know, it isn't necessarily something that they can just pick up and be absolutely fine.
In order for our neurodivergent kids to be able to pursue independence, they need to have life skills, in inverting commas. These things that they need to have in order to function in everyday society, right? And so I wanted to go through a few of the basic life skills that we're told they need to have, and look and kind of pick them apart and understand where there might be difficulties. And you can give me hope.
Okay, I can
they're
try.
fine, and I'm worrying too much. Because the thing is that a lot of these life skills, neurotypicals just pick up just by osmosis, right? They just observe. Like I'm a neurotypical. I'm not ashamed of it. I'll say it.
I love it. You're in a minority.
I really am in this household and in this community. But that's fine. It gives me a unique perspective that none of you guys do. So obviously, as a neurotypical, I just picked this stuff up. I watched other people do it, go, oh, that's how you do it. Or I was taught stuff and I kind of took that on board and learned it, or I sought guidance, or I built my own strategies. That's something that neurotypicals find it kind of natural. But all of these things are very difficult for many neurodivergent kids. And I wanted to discuss some of these kind of the core skills that come easy to others and see how you were able to navigate them as well. So obviously the first area that I wanted to look at, which you've alluded to a few times already, is getting a job. Yeah. Because that's the big one, isn't it?
It is.
Like in terms of functioning in the big wide world,
Yeah.
you need to try and earn money and do something that is kind of worthwhile and meaningful. And that is a massive concern of mine, certainly, of what jobs can my kids do? What will they do? I mean...
Well, I think the amazing thing about the world at the moment is there's probably a load of jobs that don't even exist yet that your kids would be amazing at. And I think that's the thing that I often say to parents is, you know, we see these kind of set jobs that 9 to 5 that we need to fit into, and that doesn't necessarily work for our children. But actually, I think if we can really support them with their passions, whatever they are, whether that's, you know, Pokemon at the moment, you know, or whether that's, you know, I talk about how Barney's first special interest was emptying all the drawers in the whole house. And I call it a special interest because it was. Everywhere he went, he would empty drawers. But that led on to something else, you know, then that led on to kind of emptying spaghetti all over the floor, dry spaghetti. Right. Sounds very random. Then that led on to train tracks, and all of these special interests kind of led on to him having this massive interest, and taught himself how to create these 3D model trains for simulator games, which he taught himself completely at, you know, YouTube. And so he finished high school around about the time that COVID had hit. So in a way, it kind of worked an advantage to him because he didn't have to sit exams, which would have been really tricky for him. He had a lot of anxiety around exams, so it was teacher based. So he did really well with his you know, qualifications. He got some really good grades, teacher grades. But then it was like, well, now what? What do you want to do? And we looked at kind of the traditional routes of university or college, or, you know, what job would you like to do? And for a while, he mulled it over, and he just said, I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can get up and go to a job at 9 o'clock and finish at 5 o'clock. And we were like, okay, that's okay. So we just had to think outside the box, really, for him. So he just had this massive passion, and he was making these trains, and he'd created this whole community of people around him online who were doing the same as him. And we were like, let's tap into that. How about if you just had a year where you just did that and tried to kind of make a job out of it, your own kind of freelancing. So as parents, we was kind of, again, in the background a little bit, trying to work out what he needed to do and help him with that. But as soon as he went all in on it, he just flew. And,
amazing.
It's what
that's
he
the
does
beauty of a
now.
special interest, right? Because they just just that hyper focus.
100%.
Yeah, and it's tapping into that, isn't it? It's finding the thing, that little thing.
And
because
I get that won't necessarily work for everybody. It won't be the same for all.
I think there'll be different routes for all of my kids.
Exactly.
I mean, when I started the life of work, when you first start out, back in my day, because now I sound old, right? Back in my day, you start out doing shitty jobs.
Yeah.
That's what you do, right? You wipe tables, you work in a pub, or you do the dishes or whatever, and you start at the bottom. And this is my massive worry about Jay with his PDA profile. Yeah. He is on the bottom rung of no one's ladder. Yeah. If he doesn't agree with the instructions of his seniors, or doesn't agree with what someone's asking him to do, he's going to tell you, and he's definitely going to get fired.
Yes, he will. And
or he'll walk out.
Yeah, it's a massive learning curve. And as a parent, it is really hard to watch these things happen. But they have to happen sometimes, yeah.
But that is a thing of how do PDAs get jobs? Physical stuff's very good for Jay. He's got a work ethic. He's definitely got a strong work ethic. Stupid things like we get log deliveries every winter, right, for the log fire, and he loves helping me with that. He works really hard. He really puts a shift in. So it's that kind of physical stuff. So it's just keeping him occupied. That's probably his ADHD brain getting the little workout that it needs as well. It's constant.
Dopamine,
and he can chat while he's doing it. The last episode I did was with Dan Clark at Mind Jam, and he was talking about how many jobs there are in the gaming industry. And he said there are jobs to do loads of different things, and that gave me lots of hope that there's lots, like you were saying, there's stuff out there that we don't even know are out there yet, and that our kids will probably pick up before we do.
Yeah, 100%. It's just thinking outside the box, and I think as parents, I think we struggle with that sometimes. But I honestly, firmly believe that with the right support, regardless of any child's abilities, there is a job for every child out there. It's just, as a society, we haven't quite got to grips with that yet and what that looks like. But in 20 years' time, I think our kids will have, so many opportunities.
I feel optimistic that the landscape is changing a bit as well, because I think that there's, the more people I speak to about this, the more I kind of recognise that there is much more of an awareness of neurodivergence and also the skill sets that neurodivergence can offer to the workplace. So I was speaking to Jess Meredith in episode 8, I think, and she has a company called Differing Minds, and their whole thing is going into workspaces and basically talking to them about the benefits of having neurodivergence in businesses from a cost effectiveness perspective. Gotcha. It's like these guys have these skills that are going to help you improve your profits.
Absolutely.
and it's like, she's doing some wonderful stuff. That's and amazing. The stuff that Dan Clark was talking about is also really inspirational. So I feel quite positive about that. Good. In terms of Otto and jobs, again, slightly different. I'm less worried about him, weirdly, in the world of jobs, because he is fine doing something repetitive, the same thing again and again and again. If he knows he's done it right and you say that was good, he'd be like, sweet, I'm now going to do this forevermore. And there are loads of jobs like that. And I think so. And he quite likes being around people. So I think he's going to be all right. He's just going to find a thing he does and keep smashing it out.
So my husband's very much like that, in that he has a very repetitive job. So he installs and looks after fire alarm systems on building sites, and he goes to these massive building sites. So you're talking huge building sites with hundreds and hundreds of fire alarms on there, and he has a map and he has to find them and the serial numbers, and he has to service them and tick them off. Now 10 minutes of that and I would be out of my head with boredom.
That is Otto's perfect job.
You go. Absolutely. It suits him down to the ground, because that side of him that needs that repetitiveness. But obviously his ADHD brain sometimes kind of gets a bit like, ooh, I'm a bit bored now, but he'll go back to it. And so there's a job out there for everybody.
That is the perfect job for Otto. His Roblox game at the moment is called Find the Marker, where there are like hundreds of markers hidden around the Roblox world,
This is what
and he just goes around finding
parents,
them.
like, look at those special interests. No matter how bizarre they are, there are skills in every special interest your child has.
Okay, another facet of independence that I'm interested to kind of learn about is health and safety.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's, again, a thing, just silly things like crossing the road is, at my kid's age at the moment. Now, Jay can do it, and he can do it because self-preservation for him is very strong. He won't be able to take anyone else with him, but he'll do it himself. Otto, I'm just terrified of Otto doing that. I mean, he's 9 now.
Okay.
And probably should be able to do that. Mm-hmm. But I'm not even going to, like you say, he's not ready for it. So I'm not going to, this is where he does not need to be out of his comfort zone.
On a road, definitely not.
For anyone's sake. I mean, with yours, what stage was that?
Yeah, quite late.
Was that different for each of them?
Yeah, it was different for each of them. Jess, very sensible, but the boys very much so, were quite late in acquiring those kind of skills. And I think part of it was to do maybe because they were in a bubble a little bit more. But again, it's actually how much do you let them out of that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. But Barney particularly had very little awareness of kind of danger and safety, and probably a similar age that you were saying about 9, he would just would be walking through town, and he used to do this parkour. He couldn't do parkour, but he used to say it and jump off everything. So he'd be like bouncing off things and across the road, but over time, it just kind of, it became more natural because we gave him a little bit more.
That's it, isn't it?
When he started high school, for example, I was petrified because I didn't know how I was going to get him home because I was working and he was going to his dad's, and we had this whole, how was he going to do it, Mm-hmm. And he ended up walking in the end, and that was one of the best things we ever did for him.
God, that's a huge win for you guys as well. You must have been absolutely terrified when it was
absolutely terrified. Right? The first time I followed him in the car, so I was just like,
did he know you were following him?
He did know, but I said,
were you like grinding the window going, you can do it, Barney,
just a bit behind, just like, he can do it, it'll be fine. And then over time it got a lot easier, and so it's just step by step, isn't it? And what you feel comfortable with. But I don't think if that hadn't happened, I don't think we would have pushed him out of his comfort zone. So again, it's that balance, isn't it? That he needed to do it for school. We would have found a way around it, I suppose, at some point.
Yeah. I mean, there's this whole thing around kind of comprehending danger as well, isn't it? I mean, crossing the road is just a facet of that, but kind of understanding where danger is that Otto and Jay, like you say, in their own little worlds, and also very distractible as well, like very easily distracted, particularly with Otto and his presentation of ADHD. He's all over the place. He gets very easily distracted. One of my big concerns really is, and I don't know if you had this when your kids were growing up, was my kids getting into trouble because of misunderstandings or because of their way that they respond to certain situations. I mean, I'm definitely talking about Jay here in particular because he gets very angry quite easily, and he, I just have a fear that he'll get involved in something, not meaning to, but it would, people will respond in the wrong way to him.
This kind of thing with our kids is, I think there's that dual thing. There's that vulnerability and also being a bit gullible, because my kids could be quite gullible when they were younger. And then there's that with that PDA part as well. You've got that actual saying the wrong thing at the wrong time to the wrong person. I always, it is a fear, and I think when
it's
he was
a fear of all parents, isn't it? I think
the
neurotypical parents are going through this same thing, and there's no different. But obviously, there's so many more things that could go wrong with my lot, and that's why my concern is probably more acute. Like you were saying as well, the gullibility, and like I do worry, again in particular with Otto, that he's not very good at reading people's intentions and understanding subtext and body language and that sort of thing. He takes everything at face value, and India is exactly the same. And that is a big worry, I think, is that they'll, like you say, get him with the wrong crowd, or just end up doing something because someone has manipulated them, or I don't know how you guard against that.
It's
either.
like you say, I think
there's no answer.
there is no
Just-
answer, and I
just-
think it is the
just saying
same
it out
things
loud.
that all parents worry about. But I think it's just having that open conversation, and we've always tried to the kids to talk to us as much as possible, and that, you know, for them to feel that they could tell us if something was worrying them. They weren't going to get into trouble for that necessarily.
And has that kind of manifested itself?
Yeah.
Have they kind of done that?
Yeah, definitely.
And
They have, yeah. It used to worry me online, kind of particularly with Barney, how much time
Yes,
he
of
spent
course.
online. That he was, even with parental controls, he was going to find things at some point. That was just the way it was,
Yeah.
you know. But he, as far as I know, he was always very honest and would come to us and say, I'm not sure about this, I found this. And
Okay,
yeah,
that's good.
and they would never, I don't think I've ever had to punish them for things, because they've always been very, you know, we've always kept that open dialogue and haven't felt the need to kind of, you know, have that in
That's
our
great.
house. Yeah.
I feel like I'm just on the cusp of that now. Just Jay's 11, so we're just on the cusp of that, sort of having to kind of just be more aware of online safety and that kind of thing. So having those open conversations is fun minefields to navigate, but we'll get there. Another of the kind of issues around independence is, of course, self-care.
Yeah.
Because again, you know, it's important that our kids look after themselves and clean their teeth and wash their hair and, you know, and eat healthily. I mean, it's not important necessarily to do any of those things, is it? But it's desirable.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful. And again, it's sort of navigating that area. That's always a worry. And there's my kids have different stances on that. I think Jay's going to be fine. He likes to be clean and tidy. Again, self-preservation. It's good for him. So that's fine. Otto, completely oblivious to any notion of cleanliness and like self-care, of doing his hair or cleaning his teeth or just wiping spaghetti from his eyebrows.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something else there when you said wiping. Been there.
No, wiping his bum as well. Oh yeah, no, that's no. He used to go through this thing as well, talking about wiping his bum, where he'd just come into a room and he'd bend over and go, "Is it clean?"
Yeah.
But I'd be like on a work call or something. It's like, I don't need it. Put it away. Yes, it's spotless. Go away.
Love it.
He uses. I mean, he's gone the other way. He's like uses so much toilet
too
roll
much,
because
yeah.
he's.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'd rather it be that way around, you know.
We've had a few blocked toilets because of
Yes,
that.
we definitely have.
Yeah.
But you know, they get there. They
get
find
there.
their way.
They do.
When he has to pay for it, he might be a bit more frugal.
Oh yeah, you'll find that definitely. But I think self-care is an interesting one, because I think when they're younger, it's something a lot of parents struggle with, things like teeth cleaning and hair washing and bathing, and particularly if you have got a PDA child, that it's actually finding that balance, isn't it? And sometimes by actually saying, okay, they're not going to clean their teeth this week, even we've done that. It's reduced those demands, and you pick your battles. And I don't think B will mind me saying this, but he did go through a stage where he really didn't clean his teeth, and for me, it wasn't worth the fight at that point. It just wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
So he didn't, and they weren't great. And you know, he did go to the dentist, and we did have to face a few fillings. But now, as an adult, he does, and you know, he does clean his teeth. He does look after himself. He does wash his hair. Like, he even buys clothes to wear for himself now, which I just never imagined that would ever be the case.
Yeah, of course.
So complete transformation. And I think sometimes it is about picking your battles, and self-care is one of those things that, you know, I think we worry about being judged by other people and other parents if our child isn't
absolutely.
clean and tidy and hairbrushed, and that I think that's the switch. It's being able to go, and it's not easy, but being able to go, do you know what? That doesn't matter. This is what matters. What matters is they're regulated and they're in school today, you know, rather than the hair's been brushed.
My line on the toothbrush thing is, I basically go, I don't care if you brush your teeth. It's your mouth. They're your teeth. You know, doesn't matter to me if you brush your teeth or not. I recommend that you do.
Yeah.
Look at my mouth. I've got fillings. They're horrible. They go, because I've got a couple of fillings. You know, I've lived life. So So I show them my feelings
Yeah.
and then go, do you want this to happen? It's up to you. I'm not going to make you do it. But the bigger issue really is that Otto doesn't do it properly.
Yeah.
Like I say, he
Oh,
just
yeah.
shoots the toothbrush.
Yeah,
Doesn't
there's
really...
brushing and then there's cleaning. And my kids used to brush their teeth, but they didn't clean them.
That's a very good analogy. I like it. So that's what I need to kind of be a bit more mindful of and help him realise, I guess. But they'll get there.
They will get there.
They'll get
Trust
there
me,
with
they
that.
will
And-
get there.
And if they
they'll be
don't, because
fine.
that's the thing as well. There are people in my life as adults that don't do that.
Yeah.
That aren't great at self-care. They're
Exactly.
fabulous humans. They're
Yeah.
some of my best friends. But it doesn't stop me loving them.
No.
It doesn't stop me thinking they're excellent people. So it's not catastrophic. Maybe it
It's
demands...
not, but in the moment it can feel like it is really
Yes.
important, can't it? And especially when they're a lot younger, when they're sort of 4 or 5 and not cleaning their teeth, we really worry, don't we? But yeah,
We think they're going to be in their 20s with no teeth.
yeah.
And like matted hair.
Or even just wearing clothes. Barney went through a stage where he just would not wear any clothes. He was naked. And I used to think, oh my God, he's never going to wear clothes. Of course he's going to wear clothes. And now he wears lovely clothes. But when you're in the thick of it, it feels very real, doesn't it? Yeah.
That's I think why I wanted to talk to you, Lisa. Just to see the end goal and go, it does, this does evolve. It's not just you just kind of copy and paste this persona onto a 20-year-old. Do you know what I mean? Or it's because that's how it can seem when you're in that moment of going, well, this is going to be exactly the same person, just bigger and an adult.
Yeah. Bonnie's definitely not walking around naked. He's wearing clothes.
Okay,
He's
good.
cleaning his teeth, and he even has his hair cut. So, yeah.
I do imagine that Jay would be very happy just living in the woods and fully naked, like Stig of the Dump or something. Okay, so another of the facets of life skills that they have to learn is self-determination, right? And advocacy, advocating for themselves and making their own choices and making their own decisions. And that, again, that's a key thing, isn't it? So that they can understand the things that they don't want to do and back away from that, so they don't dysregulate themselves.
Yeah.
But also, just as importantly, know the things they do want to do and then go for it and seek it out. And that's what I think as parents of neurodivergence, we spend so much of our time, certainly in these years that I'm going through at the moment, doing that for them.
Yeah.
Like stopping them doing stuff that is going to dysregulate them and going, oh, you'd like to do this and you should do this, and kind of steering them that way. Tell me it gets easier.
It does. I mean, all 3 of mine have been very different when it comes to that sort of self-advocacy. I mean, Barney particularly has always been very strong with knowing what he did and didn't want to do and speaking about it. I tell a story about how he requested an IEP goal to be removed from his IEP when he was about, 10, maybe 9, 10.
Wowzers.
He was
nice.
very insulted by it. His TA had sat down with him and had said, we're going to work on some social skills, eye contact and all that crap that we used to teach back then for social skills and turn taking, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And he was horrified. He was like, my conversation skills are really good. He says, when I'm talking to people who understand what I'm talking about, he said, it's people who aren't autistic that I don't know what they mean. So he was so upset that was an IEP goal, and he wouldn't give up till it was removed, and it was.
So they removed it.
He removed it. Yeah. He said, I am sociable. I'd have no problems with conversation.
This got an absolutely valid point there as well. Like, who are you to say why my
He's
conversation
definitely
should
right, yeah. Barney's a very special human being who has got a very clear goal.
Good, yeah.
The other 2 weren't necessarily like that.
Yeah, I mean, Jay is self-determination is not a problem.
Yeah.
Jay, if anything, there is too much self-determination. Because he thinks he knows best at all times, and everyone has to dance to the beat of his drum, and he won't accept help from anybody because no one knows better than him. So that, if anything, that we need to teach him the opposite. What's the opposite of
No, don't teach him the opposite. That's good.
But he also needs to acknowledge that other people are also entitled to opinions.
Yeah.
And that's the tricky one.
Yeah, it's a tricky
and in terms of advocating for himself, I don't think it does that much.
Right.
Like, I don't think he's the one that drives that. Me and Tam do that a lot,
Yeah.
of making sure that these accommodations are made for him and fighting his battles. And obviously, you know, he's only young, but he's not had to do any of that. So that is the thing that hopefully over time he'll learn.
Yeah.
Conversely, Otto appears to be an absolute superstar, advocating for himself. Like, I went into his EHC review meeting recently, and they were like, we had a new teacher. That is potentially anxiety inducing for Otto because he doesn't know who it is and he doesn't know what to expect. And apparently he just walked up to him and, just so you know, I am autistic with ADHD.
Love it. That is amazing.
It's so nice to hear.
Yeah.
It's like wicked. So, fine,
Good
tick
for
that
him.
off.
Yeah.
So it's something that he's very aware of.
Yeah.
And so I think he's going to be all right at
sounds
advocating
like
for himself.
it, yeah.
He finds decision making incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And so he will basically be guided by the group and the so if he's with a group of like excellent people who have got his best interests at heart, wicked. They're the Sherpas, right, that we were talking about, the people that are going to help him navigate through life, and he'll be a great person to be along with. But if he, if people are trying to steer him down the wrong path, or he just doing stuff that he doesn't want to do really, but doesn't realise doesn't want to do it, that's going to be a difficult thing.
It's a tough one, isn't it? And it's one of those. It's such a steep learning curve. And again, I think it's about having those really open conversations as early as possible. And I think we shy away from it sometimes as parents, talking about things like drugs and sex and things like that, because we think if we're going to talk about it, somehow it's magically going to happen. But actually I think with our kids who are very straightforward in ways that actually you can have really straightforward conversations. And I think that in that way that can work for us.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, that's a benefit, because you take away they don't get embarrassed, my kids.
Not at all.
So there's no embarrassment or giggling about that kind of thing. That's really interesting. And also, Tam is a biology teacher, so every conversation we've ever had about that is
the right
all
words.
about the correct scientific terms. So like, India is the only girl of her age I know that uses the word vulva.
Oh wow. Wow. Amazing.
because early doors, Tam is just like, that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's what your boy. This is,
My boys were very open about periods as well, because it was openly discussed in our household, and it was just like we say, we used the right terminology. They understood it, and there was no giggling. It was just okay. So they've gone forward, and they've had some, but Barney particularly has got some friends that are girls, some really good friends actually, who he has these conversations with, and they're just like, oh Barney, you really get it. And I'm so proud of that's one of the things I'm most proud about,
amazing.
is that my boys
So you should
kind of totally get and understand what a period is. And
well, that's interesting. I'd not ever thought of that as a positive, of not having to have that difficult sex education chat. It's going to be a piece of cake.
Yeah,
like,
have it now.
Here are the cold hard facts, kids.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that's wicked. Oh, I feel a bit better now. One of the areas of independence that I'm also a little bit worried about, I think, and all parents of neurodivergence are worried about, is personal finance. Money, looking after money, like not being exploited and taken advantage of. And I mean, Jay's quite good at money.
Oh, okay.
It's quite heartening.
Oh, that's good.
And like, he doesn't spend money. He's always like, he'll always ask me to buy stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, you've got your own money. It's like, yeah, but
that
you've
sounds
got a
like
credit
Barney.
card.
Barney's going to be a millionaire one day.
Yeah, I think Jay's quite good at that. He's pretty shrewd about that kind of thing. Did you do kind of pocket money? Did you sort of have that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we did pocket money. And I remember once Barney asking, because their grandparents used to give them pocket money as well when they were alive. And I remember they used to get £2 off their grandma every week. And I remember Barney at one point asking for it as a direct debit into his bank account, please.
Nice.
Because he was like very shrewd. But yeah,
I want the interest, Grandma. Come on.
He liked to see money in his bank, and he liked to but yeah, we did pocket money. And to be completely honest with Barney now, I still give him an allowance, because even though he's working freelance, he's not making masses. So and that feels okay at the moment to still be doing that. But yeah, we gave pocket money, and yeah, it worked well.
Yeah, I think that's the next thing. See, Tam regularly takes them to the bank, so they are aware of putting money in, and they've got their accounts and stuff. But also, you get a free toy if you go to the bank every month and deposit something. It's good. Like Metro Bank, actually, that's quite a good thing. They give you like a little gift if you deposit something every month, but you have to go in branch. So there you go. There's a little top tip there. I think yours are a little bit old for that.
Maybe. I don't know. You're never too old for a free gift.
No, that's true. So, I mean, Otto, on the other hand, is terrible with money. He doesn't understand its value at all. The other day, I overheard him and India playing a game in his room. And I poked my head around the door and went, "What are you playing?" And he went, "Oh, it's a game where I've hidden my money around the room, and if India finds it, she gets to keep it." That's a terrible game.
Did he invent the game, or did she invent the game?
No,
he invented it.
No, but she did not point out the flaw in his game from his financial perspective. No, she wasn't. She wasn't calling him out on that at all. She was like, "Oh, I'll play this game. This is great. What a fantastic game to play for everyone but Otto."
I think the kids were later probably understanding value. So I think I don't think they understood a pound coin was a different value to a 10p, and now we don't really see cash, do we? So it's we don't kind of have a lot of money around. It's all on our phones and on cards and things. So I don't know whether that's something to even worry about. But
you read these stories, don't you, as well, of kids playing games on their parents' phones and stuff, and then buying all of the gems that you need to get to the next level, and like maxing out the credit cards and stuff like that, which is, again, it's a concern of mine. But Jay is actually pretty shrewd, and again, this is part of his thing. Like, he's got those games, but he was like, "I'm not spending money on that's a waste of money." So he's really clued in. So that makes me feel kind of good about him. Whereas Otto, I would not let him anywhere near that kind of game because, again, it doesn't have any value to him yet. No. So I think, we'll wait a few years until that kicks in, I think. The next thing in terms of life skills they need to learn is transportation. Okay. Right, that is one of the ones in that list. I was like, oh my God, this is the thing that I think about most often, and I'm not sure why, because it's not the most important thing, but will my kids ever learn to drive? Yeah. Okay. Is it advisable? Is it advisable with their profiles to learn to drive? Do any of your kids drive?
Yeah, they all drive. Yeah.
All of them? Okay.
All of them, yeah. So Barney took a lot longer than the other two, and we didn't think he was going to get there. There was one point where we were like, "B, do you want to maybe think about not doing this?" Because every time he failed his test, he was very upset about it. So, and
that's anxiety inducing as well, the driving test.
It was he got very anxious, and then he was determined he was going to do it, and then he passed. He did pass. Wowzers. And it was like the best feeling. Like, I'm so proud. I think out of everything he's done, that is the thing I'm most proud about, because like you, I was like, will he be able to drive? Has he got, will he have the skills to be able to, is it safe for him to drive? And he doesn't drive. He passed his test and he hasn't driven since.
Oh, right. How long ago was that?
That was about 6 months ago.
Okay.
So, and I haven't pushed it with him because...
Is he not interested? Was it just that was an achievement in itself, and now he's done it, he's ticked it off?
I think partly, and I think part of him is quite nervous about it as well, the fact that he would be driving on his own, and I've offered to take him out and things like that. But he likes getting the train, because obviously that's one of his interests anyway. So he loves to get a train. So we bought him a rail pass. But he won't get a bus.
I think India will be pretty competent.
Yeah.
She'll be all right.
Yeah.
The problem will be that she won't ask for help if she breaks down or has an accident.
Okay.
She'll just sit there. That'll be a problem. But apart from that, I think the driving thing, I think she'll be all right. With Otto, he has already said he doesn't want to learn to drive. Okay. He never wants to drive. Okay. He's aware that it's scary for him, and I think for everyone's sake that's totally fine by me. I'm fine with that, because he's easily distracted. He's naturally a clumsy person, so I don't think it's his bag. That's fine. And I thought initially of sort of going, well, one day you might want to learn to drive, and don't rule it out. And that's like, actually, you're telling me this, and and you can advocate for yourself. So I'm not going to convince you to do that. And I saw a video on Instagram recently by a guy called Torren Wolf. Do you know Torren from Instagram?
Oh,
He's
possibly.
a 16-year-old. I think he's American. He's an autistic kid he's brilliant. He wears top hats a lot and like fancy clothes, and he's a great advocate. He talks a lot about his neurodiversity, and he did this post where he talked about why he'll never learn to drive, and it just was just like, oh man, he put it so beautifully.
Yeah.
He was like, look, everyone seems to want me to be able to drive. Okay. And particularly, in America, where it's like from 16, I think, it's like everyone wants me to drive. And I tell them I don't want to drive. And they go, no, don't rule it out. You should do it. It's like, no, look at it from my perspective. I find it difficult to focus. I get easily distracted.
Yeah.
I get easily overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I'm sensitive to bright lights and sounds. It's like none of these things are conducive to safe driving.
Absolutely.
Why I
Wow,
am
yeah.
not getting behind that. It was like, yeah. That makes perfect
such
sense. It is.
Yeah. And I do wonder if that's the case with Barney, because he would come back from his driving lesson and be very dysregulated because it would take all of his energy, for that hour. And then he would come back in his room, lights out under his duvet, because he was really, it was very stimulating for him.
I mean, it's stimulating for me. If you go on a long drive, the amount of focus that takes and the amount of variables you have to constantly be on the lookout for, I can imagine it must be really, really overwhelming for a neurodivergent brain.
But some people drive and some people get driven, so my sisters don't drive, either of them.
Well, Otto is getting driven. I think that's clear. Now, I am genuinely fearful of Jay being able to drive. I try and extrapolate Jay now to Jay then, and I just...
It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe he'll be different when he's, but when he's a little bit older and he's not being dysregulated by school. Because I think school is driving a lot of his kind of aggression and anger issues at the moment. But because at the moment, if I sort of transpose this Jay onto a Jay who's old enough to learn to drive, he is a prime candidate for road rage. Do you know what I mean? He knows it best. If someone cuts him up, he's not just going to rein it in and go, you know what, that guy's an idiot, but I'll just keep driving. No, he'll be like leaning out the window and honking. So,
you're describing my husband. So, his ADHD when he's driving, there are times where I just think I'm sort of like holding on, but
The other thing is, like, how do PDA people learn to drive?
Well,
like, genuinely,
very good question. Yeah,
like the driving instructor is going to have to prove their mettle on the very first day. I'm just going like, I know my shit. Watch this, kid, and then do some crazy driving. You're like, okay, fine, I trust you, because like you hear of people who teach their kids to drive.
No, I would
never.
Never.
I mean, I can't. That would be my literal worst nightmare. Is teaching Jay to drive, and sort of he's behind the wheel of my car, and I'm sitting calmly in the passenger seat, going, "You might want to just avoid that pedestrian." You're like, you don't own me.
How do you reduce demands when you're teaching? Yeah.
How, as a PDA person,
I don't know.
Do you do an emergency stop? When they like, when I tap the dashboard, you're going to stop the car. Well, I'm keeping driving. I'll stop the car when I stop the car.
These are all very good questions that I don't have the answer to. It just miraculously happened.
Yeah, so public transport is the other option, and again, that has its own issues. Again, kind of planning journeys, because again, like as an adult neurotypical, that's a nightmare. Is working out how you're going to get from one place to another, and the different connections, the different buses and stuff. And I was talking to Heidi Maver in the episode 7, and she was talking about her son Theo getting on a bus for the first time, and that was hugely empowering, and it was like it was one of the tiny epic wins. And I have hope that that's going to be a thing that we have to kind of help Otto in particular navigate. Do you still have to do that? Do you kind of help him navigate?
So Barney particularly walks a lot, so he'll walk everywhere, and he's quite happy to do that. And I think partly that is because so he doesn't have to get on the bus.
Isn't it?
But it works for him. So he's never really got a bus at all, because he just wouldn't do it. For him, it was like, no, I'm not going to do it. That's not something I'm going to do. But he will get a train because he just feels more comfortable. So there've been times where he's been somewhere and not sure like what time the train is back. So we've Googled and, sent him the information, and then he's done it. And that was really empowering for him. But again, it's those little micromanagement tools. But what
about the things that are out of his control? Like if the
Yeah.
train's cancelled, if the
Yeah.
driver doesn't turn up,
We've not
right?
we've not had that yet. We're lucky. But what did happen one time was he went to stay with some friends at university that were at university, and I was very nervous about him going. But he was going with a trusted friend, and they got the train. But he decided he wanted to come back because they were staying in student halls and
Right.
they had to share a toilet, and it was just everything
Yeah,
that Bonnie
yeah.
would
I
not
don't
do
blame
in a
him, it's
million
awful.
years. Yeah, they were all drunk, and he was like, "This is not for me." So
Okay.
I want to come home. So and he got a train at like
Okay.
it wasn't early hours in the morning, but it was late, and he didn't like contact us at all to say I need help. He actually contacted one of his friends in America who was awake at the time. This is how convoluted he was about it. He knew she'd be awake, contacted her, and she helped him to find out kind of how to get to the train station, when the train was, and he got home. And I was
What? So he didn't wake you up? Was that why he did it that way?
I was mortified because I was like, all this was going on, I didn't know about it. And he was like,
That's
no.
very logical, though.
Yeah, very logical. And actually, the more I thought about it, I thought, actually, that was amazing that he was like,
Yeah.
right, who can help me at this point in time?
Like,
Who's
I want to
gonna-"
inconvenience people. They
Yeah.
want to be awake.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So that was really empowering for him, and
Yeah.
for me to go, well, actually, he coped. You know, when he had to cope, he found a way. So yeah, it was heartwarming actually.
So obviously the biggest goal of independence is living alone, isn't it?
Yes.
It's living with other people, but just
Yeah.
living out of my
Out
house.
of the house,
You know,
yeah.
with respect to my kids, love them, get out of the house. Now, I mean, for whatever reason, Jay is convinced that when he's 18,
Yeah.
he owns our house.
Oh, right,
I've told
okay.
him a number of times that's not the case. He's very adamant that at 18 it's his house, and
That's going to be interesting then.
I mean, I'm not going to go easily, but I am starting to sort of look at house prices nearby, just in case I do have to get out. Conversely, Otto never wants to leave us.
Yeah.
He's consistent, if nothing else. He never wants to leave the house. He always wants to live at home. And he's
Yeah.
very anxious about that. Now, with yours, did
Yeah.
you kind of have some that wanted to get out as soon as they could, and some that wanted to
Yeah.
to stay?
Yeah, so Barney sounds very much like Otto. So when he was that age, he was, I'm never leaving home. I'm going to stay with you, your house or Dad's house, or I'll build a house on the side of your house. Or so we had all this, but now he wants to own a house. So he doesn't want to rent.
Okay.
He's not going to waste his money on that. He's going to own a house. So I don't know how. He's very aware, but I don't think he truly understands about kind of the finances involved in that, because he talks about, I've seen these nice houses on my walk and I'd like to have one like that one day. And part of me thinks, do I try and talk to him about that and explain that's not realistic, or is that unfair? You know, so we're kind of in that place at the moment of actually looking at what will that look like for him in the future. And he can live here as long as he wants, but obviously, you know, at some point he doesn't want to. So
yes, but he's projecting himself into that situation, which is quite, that's quite interesting that he's got that desire for independence now. But that's, as you say,
very much
kind of
not the case
later
before.
than the other two, for example.
Yeah.
So is Jess kind of living independently, happily? And
yeah, she is. She's a home girl, and we're very close. We have a very close relationship. So she initially wasn't sure about moving out. And she did get a flat, but she's about half an hour drive away. So she enjoys the independence, because I'd say out of all three of them, she's the most structured in her life, which
Right, okay.
I actually didn't realise until she moved out just how structured she is. And she can control that environment now. So it's interesting when we go and see her, how she reacts to us being in her environment.
It's interesting.
Yeah, really interesting. And she's got lots of skills. So, yeah.
That's good. That's very
Yeah.
similar to Tam, actually, which I kind of hope, because, Tam is late diagnosed autistic ADHD, but is sort of overcompensates for the ADHD by being super ordered and making lists, just loads and loads of lists, and having a really kind of set thing that when they get in the door, they have to unpack their bag in a certain way and immediately, and cannot have a conversation, and it's very ordered. Now I've done that thing, now I can talk to people.
Exactly,
and,
yeah.
Which is, that's pretty impressive as a
It
kind
is.
of a a way of coping with your neurodivergency. I'm hoping that's the same sort of presentation that we get.
I think we didn't realise how much Jess was masking at home till she moved out, and that was quite a learning curve for us. That that she, in a way, that's quite, as a parent, it's quite hard to know that she's masking around us. But now she's actually got her own place. It's so nice to see her just doing what she needs to do. And if I ever go over there, like I did stay over one night, I probably wouldn't do it again, but I could see her getting quite tense about where my shoes were, about you know where I was putting my things, and her fridge is very ordered, and I just thought, okay, that's okay, you know, she's doing her and she's living the life that
but has
she
found a
wants to
strategy
do.
that works, and that's that's fantastic. I mean, again, I'm trying not to just transpose my kids now into the future just on bigger bodies, because I think they will learn strategies.
They will.
I don't think Otto will. I think Otto will probably live at home for a very long time. I can't see him. We might need to kind of nudge him out, or maybe build him a little house at the end of the garden or something.
Yeah, that's kind of what I see
like
us doing with Barney at some point, is maybe finding somewhere for him, or just supporting him in a way that he can live kind of out of my house. Yeah,
but I think India will be okay. She's quite keen to cook. She likes. She's got a thing about making canapes at the moment.
Wow, impressive.
Well, it's basically just putting shit on a cocktail stick and then feeding it to me. It's really random as well. It's just like a bit of chicken and some raw carrot and a bit of lime, and it's a bit odd. It's quite. I mean, you know, but it shows independence, right? It shows that she is definitely kind of keen to be independent and to kind of learn some of these skills, and she insists on doing cleaning and stuff, so I'm not so worried about her. So we'll see how that all pans out. I guess the question that underpins all of this is there anything as parents of neurodivergent kids that we can do to prepare them for this independence? Because it's not one size fits all. This is the thing, isn't it? It's not just like do this and this and they're away. It's like every single human has a very different profile and a different set of instructions.
They do.
So
I think something I harp on about all the time, and it always goes back to this, is that our kids don't have to be pushed out of their comfort zone to learn independent skills or to learn. A lot of learning goes on when they're in their comfort zone. So I think if I could only say one thing to parents is don't worry that they're not doing enough, or they're not going enough places, or they're not, you know, mixing enough, or they will get there, but they'll get there on their own agenda, on their own time, and they will learn those skills. Some of the skills they might never learn. You know, as I say, Barney still can't tie his own shoelaces, but that doesn't mean he's not having a really great life, you know.
Just in slip-ons.
Yeah, exactly. In Velcro shoes, or I do them. So try not to get hung up on that.
Yeah.
And just try not to, like, I think the way you've described it really well, it's you won't be taking that child and putting them onto a 20-year-old body. They will, over time, change and adapt.
That's the hardest thing to get, really. But also, you know, some of the things, it's hard not to project what I see as kind of the life that they want to live onto them. Like, because I go, well, I want them to have loads of friends. It's like, well, Jay doesn't want loads of friends. Do they want loads of friends? Yeah. He doesn't. So again, if he's got one or two trusted friends, and then that's enough. And I want Otto to want to live independently. He probably doesn't want to. So it's just kind of checking your own expectations a little bit as well, I think, and working out what you're projecting onto them. And
other people's expectations for our kids as well. I think that's one of the hardest things as a parent, is actually having the strength to go, actually, no, we're going to do it our way. And we're not going to worry that he hasn't cleaned his teeth today, or what someone's going to think about the fact that, you know, he's only got pants on when and
they're on his head.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I just kind of hope that no matter what they do when they get older, that they will see Tam and I as a place of safety, as they do now. I think that's the one thing I really want to be consistent, if we could manage it, is that, you know, no matter what they face in the outside world, no matter how dysregulated or overwhelmed they get or frustrated they get, they can always come back and talk to us and you know, come home when
Yeah.
they need to.
Yeah, and that's what they do. It's almost like a reset. Every now and then they'll appear,
Yeah.
and have a little bit of a reset, and then off they go again. So yeah,
You sound like you've absolutely nailed it, Lisa.
I definitely have not. You haven't spoken to my children.
It's true. That's the follow-up podcast. I didn't tell you that. Sorry, they got a right to reply on this.
Oh my goodness.
It's not all rubbish.
So yeah, this brings me on to the positive side of things,
Yeah.
okay? Because there are positives. So, like, if we look at now,
Yeah.
society now, I genuinely think that societal views of neurodiversity and acceptance of different neurotypes is making it easier for them to be independent,
Yeah.
I think. Because I like to think, anyway, that people are going to see neurodiversity and go, okay, that guy needs accommodations making, or and that guy's not trying to start a fight. He's just he wants me to get out of his way. He just doesn't know the polite way of asking it.
I think we're getting there, aren't we? I think it's just we've got a long way to go, but
of course we do. Yeah, I'm not saying that it's solved, but but compare it to 20 years ago.
100%.
It's a different world, and it will, it feels like there's a bit of momentum building, and I think social media, is hugely important for that in terms of the amount of neurodivergents now that are advocating for themselves and going, this is my experience, and putting it out there and sharing their stories. I think is really important to helping other people see that. Like for me, certainly just getting that insight into people's worlds. Torren Wolf talking about driving and going, I get it now because you put it in. Okay, wicked.
It's so important that we hear from autistic people because they are the experts. They're the people who are living it.
Yeah, and I always get very heartened by talking to people on Neuroshambles, talking to guests on Neuroshambles, yourself included, because universally the people that I talk to are like, my kids have just found their tribe. Yeah. They found the thing. And I guess when I'm going through school with my kids at the moment, and Jay in particular is not school shaped, and he's really struggling, and it's difficult for me to kind of see that once he gets through that and he's able to follow his interests more, and he's not being forced to do geography and
really at a Catholic school was interesting.
all of this when he's through that, then then he'll find his tribe, and he'll so I do feel positive that life of independence is achievable, and is and I feel optimistic about that.
Neurodiversity champions.
Okay, so onto the neurodiversity champions section now. Is there anyone that you've got, Lisa, that you want to give a shout out to who is an advocate of neurodiversity, or an organisation that are doing wonderful things?
Yeah, there's a couple of people. So the first lady is called Danielle Yetterhall. You'll find her on Instagram.
Yeah.
PDA Parenting. And she's just written a book. She's a parent herself. And she's one of the people who really validated kind of my parenting when I look back. She's doing an amazing thing for parents. So definitely give her a follow.
Yeah, definitely.
And the other person is a lady called Sarah Jane Harvey. On Instagram, she's Agony Outie, Autie.
Okay.
She's an actually autistic person herself, and she is doing some amazing work in the field of stimming and the nervous system, and actually recognizing how our children, how their nervous system needs to be so regulated, and actually how we can look at that within schools. And she's just doing amazing things. She's just really positive and affirming. Great. So two really great people.
Obviously, the neurodiversity champion that I'm going to mention is yourself, Lisa. You've got to champion yourself. If you can't advocate for yourself, then you can't advocate for your kids, right? Because your stuff, as I saw it on Instagram when I first joined it, and it's great. Have you changed your handle, by the way, and put autism at the end? Was it just the school run? Yeah, so it was just the school run mum, but it's now the school run mum autism. And just the stuff you put on is wonderful, and it is uplifting. It's really positive, and it's really nice. It's just nice to see, you give parents of autistic kids the permission to to take it easy on themselves, and
definitely,
and a lot of that stuff is much needed And obviously, you've also got the membership as well, which is well, explain it. Explain the membership to people.
So the membership is basically that. It's a membership for parents with autistic kids, and it's basically what you see on Instagram, but in a kind of safe environment. And it's where parents can come and get access to lots of different professionals as well that they might normally wait kind of months, if not years, to see. It's a very autism affirming place, and we kind of have like monthly topics and clinics, lots of resources, and just all the good stuff in one place, really. But it's actually closed at the moment, unfortunately. We opened it up and it closed yesterday, so that's really bad timing. But we will be opening it up again later on in the year.
Great. Okay. But in the meantime, your Instagram account's got all that, all the good stuff.
Yeah, there's lots of free stuff on Instagram, and I often do like free workshops and stuff. So,
you'll check the show notes, everyone. I'm going to put all those details in there for that.
Tiny epic wins.
Okay, on to Tiny Epic Wins now, where we get to celebrate things that in a neurotypical world would be no big deal, but in our neurodivergent lifestyles, is epic wins. Have you got any tiny epic wins for us?
Do you know what? We get so many as well. Like on a Friday Instagram, we do weekly small wins.
Oh,
so,
really? Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that in Nikki, I promise.
Yeah. I believe you. So we see so many, like, just amazing things, just little things like, you can put me on the spot now, so I can't think of any, but just things like if their child has tried something new, or clean their teeth that day, or just so many things. And in the membership we see stuff like that, so I can't think of just one, but definitely check that out on a Friday. And
it's important it's important to celebrate these things and to go, you know what, that's a big thing, I'm taking this. So our tiny epic win was a play date. So Jay has been having a rough time lately, and he's been just kind of isolating himself, and I'm letting him do it because he needs that to regulate. He needs to be in his room and he doesn't want kind of people around. But he's got a friend of his that they live around the corner from us, and we went to school on the very first day, and we were walking up with them and went, "Oh, you walking up and starting school together?" And we got chatting, and they became very firm friends for a long time. And as they've kind of got older, and as kids do, social interaction becomes more important, and social dynamics become more important. So they sort of drifted apart, and they're still friends, but they don't really encounter each other much because they're Jay doesn't really have a circle of friends, and his friend has loads of friends. And her mum contacted me and said she's having a really rough time at the moment because those social dynamics are now evolving, and and she's being ostracized a little bit, and she really misses those interactions with Jay, and could she come over for a play date with Jay?
Oh, wow.
And so I sort of mentioned it to Jay, and he was like, yeah, fine, that'd be nice. I was like, oh, okay, fine. So I set it up, and she came over for this play date, and it was just wonderful because Jay was laughing. They were both laughing so much and just having such a wonderful time, because Jay doesn't really get to have those kind of play dates. But also from her perspective, he's just Jay. There's no dynamic there. There's no edge there. He's just Jay. And and they had a really lovely time. And like her mum said afterwards, like, thank you so much, because he's just, his honesty and his authenticity are really what she needs right now, because she's got friends who are not, just not being authentic, and, are being two-faced, and all of that, stuff that happens. It's part of life, but just to kind of reconnect with an old friend who's got that. And just as they were leaving, I overheard her say, "This was fun, we should do it again." And he went, "Sure."
Oh, wow.
Which sounds non-committal, right? But as we know, that's like a big thing for people. Now, what she probably didn't realise is the sentence she said was extremely low demand. I don't know if it was by design. We should do this again. It wasn't,
That's just a perfect sentence, isn't it?
I'll just pop it on the table and you can deal with that. But so he said, and so they've had another one since. And
oh, wow.
And it's a really lovely thing. It's just kind of, uplifted me a bit, I think. Just to say, actually, there is a real value in our autistic kids and how genuine they are in their friendships.
Oh, well, that's epic, actually.
Yeah, it is epic.
What the flip?
The final bit of this section is the what the flip section, where we get to share any particular moments from our neurodivergent kids that they've said or done that makes you go, I don't know what to do with this. So have you got any what the flip moments for us, Lisa?
Yeah, from the past, probably.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
I was thinking about this today, actually. It's probably Barney who's the one who had most moments. I don't know. I got so many to choose from. One, when he couldn't say certain words right and was running around town shouting, instead of shouting Coca-Cola Coke, he was shouting Coca-Cola cock as he was running around town, past the bowling alley, like the green bowls.
Crown green bowls.
People.
Oh
yeah,
my God.
that's the one. Yeah,
Mortifying.
So that sticks in my head. That's one. There was the time that he had a special interest that was mobility scooters. That was he would shout out at people when he saw them, I love your scooter. Of course, he was being genuine, but
yes, of
they
course.
Didn't necessarily realise that. I think
they thought he was taking the piss.
Yeah, so that was tricky. So those are probably two that stick in my head.
I've not heard of a special interest in mobility scooters. That's pretty sweet.
Oh, there's been many special interests that we've had to sort of navigate. Yeah.
So I've got two what the flip moments this week. One was today, and it's quite dark, but I just wanted to say it anyway because it's worth sharing those moments as well, right? Yeah. With the PDA child. So I was Jay's having a rough time at school at the moment, and I appeared to be the punching bag. So I was waving him off at the school gates, and I try and keep it light, and I try and keep it enthusiastic, and I waved him off towards the school gates. And they went, "Have a good day," and he turned around, and he went, "I swear I'll kill you." And then he kept walking in, and obviously all the other parents heard it. And he was so it was so sinister and so heartfelt. Obviously, I get that daily, so it's water off a duck's back to me. But they were all really shocked.
I can just picture it. Actually, I can just imagine the look you got as well.
Yeah, and the other one, a slightly lighter note, is that it's been quite hot lately, and Jay won't wear a coat when it's freezing cold, but on a hot day, he's chosen a raincoat. He's decided he's going to wear a raincoat, and he zipped it all the way up and he pulled it over his head. And as we were about to leave, I was like, do you think you need a raincoat today when there's no prospect of rain? It's a beautiful day. And he went, I feel safe in my coat, like an abalone in its shell. And I was like, okay, I'm not arguing with that.
You've been told. Yeah, there's no argument there.
You can't argue with an abalone. Okay, that brings us to the end of this episode of Neuroshambles. There's been a lot to cover, so thank you so much for coming on, Lisa. I really appreciate getting the opportunity to chat to you and just have a little bit of hope and belief that my neurodivergent hooligans are going to turn out to be older neurodivergent hooligans.
I hope I haven't just put you off completely.
No, not at all. No, not at all. But I think it's also good and it's important to kind of share the fears and the concerns that I have as a parent and that you had when you were kind of, when they were growing up. And I'm sure many of our listeners have as well, to go, yeah, I feel the same things. And they're all going to turn out in totally different ways, of course. But there are some shafts of light in amongst the gloom. I'll also say a massive thank you to the listeners. Thank you for joining us once more. I really appreciate that. If you can continue to share, that would be really good. Tell people about it. That'd be really good, because I'd like to get this into more people's ears if at all possible. As ever, we are on the usual socials. We're on Instagram and Facebook and Threads. No longer Reddit, guys. Reddit died. And the final thing that remains for me to say is, have a nice life.